Parents, does this sound familiar? You've taken your kid to specialist after specialist, you've run every test, you've tried every supplement, diet, therapy, protocol, and you're still sitting there going, why is nothing working? There's one word, one concept, one missing piece that almost nobody is talking about. Once you understand it, everything else starts to make sense. That word is subluxation, or neurological dysregulation. By the end of this video, you're going to understand more about the root cause of why so many kids are struggling than most other providers do. What we're going to learn in this video is what subluxation actually is and how it affects your child's entire body, how the perfect storm of early life stressors set the stage for subluxation. We're going to talk about why traditional testing, lab draws, even gut testing might miss what's really going on, and how the insight scans can find what other tools can't. I want you to leave with the path forward of what healing looks like for your child and what those next action steps are. And this really does need to be talked about, guys. 40% of school-aged kids are dealing with at least one chronic health condition. That's crazy. That's mind-boggling. And the scary part is it's worsening, right? Every year that goes by, the statistics and the rates for sensory processing challenges and anxiety and ADHD and autism and some of these chronic immune regulation cases, they get worse and they get worse. And so something that we're doing is not working. It's not just genetics, right? We're going to talk about that in the video. It's not just something that changed in the environment. We got to get to what that real root cause is. And the other thing I really hate about this scenario is that the current advice is terrible. Guys, the current advice is some version of either they'll grow out of it, let's just wait and see, none of that really helps you in the moment, or we just shift the blame, right? We do blame something like genetics and we miss the actual root issue. And genes don't change in just a couple of decades we've seen the rates of these conditions or challenges skyrocketing. There is something more to this story. The truth is, with these issues and these struggles, they don't grow out of them, they just grow into the next version of them. We see that all the time because we see the same story of a baby dealing with the same sort of pregnancy or birth trauma, showing up as a toddler with the same sort of concerns that then the school-age kid and then the high schooler, they deal with the same predictable pattern. And when we can connect the dots between those, it makes a lot of sense for parents. That's what I want to do for you right now. The bottom line that I think you should think about with this is the same thing is going on. We just call it something different in different age ranges, right? The same underlying cause is going to present differently in a newborn as it does in a toddler and as it does in a school-age kid, but the same underlying mechanism is taking place. So let's define this word. What is that subluxation term that I started this video with? What I can tell you is what it's not is just a bone out of place, right? And a lot of chiropractors don't really understand that. Is a subluxation is not a misaligned bone. There's really three steps or three facets to what's going on there. There is a misalignment, there's a physical misalignment, but what that leads to is really what matters. And that is fixation or restricted motion, so some sort of abnormal motion. That is the trigger of affecting proprioception. Proprioception is going to be a huge part of what we talk about in this video. That sensor of yourself, your body and your brain's connection, that is massively impactful. And that's what leads to then the third part of subluxation, which is a neurological imbalance. So we have misalignment that leads to fixation or restricted motion, which is then going to negatively affect proprioception. And then that's what creates this neurological imbalance. Think of it this way, guys. It takes your basic operating system for your child, their nervous system, and instead of being designed to operate at 5G speed, right, instead of having that ideal design that they are given, they're working on dial-up, right? We could probably think back as parents, if you're similar enough to me, you think back to the dial-up eras, and it wasn't what today is, right? It wasn't what 5G on your smartphone internet is. But that's what the kid is going through if they have this subluxation. If they have that neurological dysregulation internally, their brain and their body aren't able to communicate like they're supposed to. So let's explain proprioception, because that is so key to understanding how the nervous system is impacted here. Proprioception, it's your body's GPS. It's your body's awareness. It's input from your joints or from other receptors in your body. It tells your brain where your body is in space. It's basically your awareness of yourself. And that is important because it tells you how much tone we need, what sort of posture we're gonna have, how can we move throughout space. And ultimately what it tells your child's nervous system or your own nervous system is whether or not we're safe. That calming, soothing, proprioceptive input tells your nervous system if we are safe or if we are in some sort of threat or some survival or some stress situation. This is the largest stream of input that your brain receives, and subluxation alters it. Because the majority of that input into the nervous system is coming through the neurospinal system, through your spine, when we have that subluxation, that misalignment, fixation, that abnormal input into the brain, it takes proprioception, turns it into nociception. Another fancy word that just means stress. Instead of that good brain food, instead of that good brain input that your nervous system is taking in, it is now receiving stress system. It's receiving SOS signals and alerts and alarm bells. Even if nothing is going on, that abnormal input, that abnormal sensory input sets off alerts. When we don't have good proprioception, nociception fills in the gap. So think of it like a seesaw, right? Think of it as this nociception, proprioception seesaw, that if one is missing, then the stress is gonna fill in the gaps. Your body's either gonna feel safe, regulated, calm, connected, or it's gonna be on alert. Every single parent we talk to with a kid who is struggling with some sort of chronic long-term challenges uses that phrase. They'll say something like, we want to get my kid out of fear mode, get them off of high alert, calm them down, help them regulate. That's what we see over and over again with these kids, is some version of that stress response is activated. Every second of the day, their brain is feeling like it's under threat, which is exhausting and overwhelming and unbelievably damaging to the rest of the body systems. So, there's one specific part of the nervous system that is going to be the air traffic control center and the main hub for that proprioceptive input, and that is right here. This upper neck and this brainstem area is the most sensory rich, most proprioceptive dense area. And so when this is affected, it's going to affect everything else symptomatically in the biggest way possible. Think of your brainstem as your autonomic control center or your air traffic control center, and it runs all those automatic functions. Things you don't really think about, whether it's gut health or sleep or the immune system or regulating sensory processing input, or even stuff like motor control, your posture, your tone, your speech, your fine motor control. All of those things are going to be regulated from this brainstem upper neck area. It's not just loaded with those proprioceptive sensors, it's also the home of the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is so key to all of this too, guys. We can't go into it in this video, but basically that is the regulation system. That is the calming part of your nervous system that counteracts the brake pedal, or that counteracts the gas pedal in the stress response in that fight or flight. It's what pumps the brake. So when we have upper neck brainstem subluxation, that's a double whammy because it's both taking away the majority of that proprioceptive good input, but then it's also damaging and affecting and injuring that vagus nerve. And so we have massive nociception with no calming regulation point. I tell parents it's like your kid has a Ferrari engine and a bicycle pedal brake system. There's a huge imbalance there, right? If we've got the Ferrari, the Lamborghini, the race car engine, and a bicycle pedal brakes, you're not going to be able to regulate and function properly. But the solution to that isn't to do what medicine does, which is turn off their superpower, bring their supercharged engine down and just medicate it away. I don't love that solution. Let's bring up the brake pedal. Let's bring up that regulation system so that it matches their strength, so that it allows their busy brain, high energy personality to be a strength and not a hindrance and not a limitation. So we gotta pump the brakes. We gotta get to that regulated piece of it because the regulation system is gonna control the gut and the immune and the sleep system. It's gonna control our autoimmune response. It's gonna control our sensory thresholds and your ability to just go through the day, your child's ability to go through the day without being hyper responsive to everything. That's something that we'll hear from a lot of parents is that they're walking on eggshells, they're tiptoeing around, just waiting for the next meltdown or next explosion. So that's the summary, guys. Subluxated brainstem means that we're missing the brake pedal and that your body is losing a big portion of its sense of self or sense of awareness of itself. How does that happen? That's the next big question. I mentioned it earlier, the birth process and the start to life is so key to this. We see that the perfect storm has 3 layers. Yes, genetics play a part, but a very small part. And what I would like you to think of it as is genetics load the gun, but the environment, these perfect storm stresses, is what pulls the trigger. Loaded gun doesn't do anything on its own until it's activated, right? And that's what the field of epigenetics is called. I absolutely encourage you to dig into that, to read on that, to research that. Epigenetics is what turns genes on, what turns genes off. If we are managing that part of our environment well, which is something that is absolutely within our control, those genetic predispositions don't matter as much. So how does the perfect storm affect our kids? It starts early. It starts with the prenatal experience. Moms being stressed in pregnancy, moms being in the fight or flight survival mode, or the family as a whole, not just mom. That is setting the stage for that baby's neurology, right? The baby and the mom are so connected. Think of the umbilical cord as the power supply. If mom is going through pregnancy in a survival mode, that is absolutely what baby is going to experience as well. So they get stuck in stress, they get stuck in fight or flight, and they're coming out, they're entering the world hardwired for fight or flight. That's our starting point. What unfortunately is all too common for kids is that birth experience is pretty traumatic as well. So many of the perfect storm kiddos we help have that stress in life. Maybe it was a C-section delivery. Maybe it was forceps or a vacuum extraction or just hands-on guidance and pulling out of the birth canal, or even just a prolonged labor where they really got stuck and jammed up. I don't think most parents realize how impactful that is or how much force is used to get baby out. Doctors in the midwife team are pulling and turning and twisting in that really fragile, sensitive area of the nervous system, that brainstem area we're talking about. We're yanking babies out by their head and neck, doing stuff you wouldn't dream of doing after they were born, right? You would never hold a kid by their head, but during the birth process, we're not just holding them by their head, we're pulling the other side because they're still stuck in there. Nobody is talking about how much of a massive impact that has on our kids, and it really sets the stage for those baby challenges like colic, reflux, latching and nursing issues, constipation, fussiness, and sleep issues that turn into the whole rest of the sequela. So it starts in that pregnancy stress. Birth trauma is a huge missing piece of that. And then what do we add to it? The third piece of the puzzle is the environmental toxins, the storm of exposures that our kids get, whether it's chemicals, heavy metals, processed foods, things in our environment, things in the water. Antibiotic usage early in life massively affects the gut and the microbiome. There's just a bombardment of this stuff that we didn't have decades ago, and that is affecting these kids too. So think of it as it's the net sum of all of that that's creating this storm of more kids dealing with chronic health conditions than ever before. Think of a kid as having a stress bucket, right? They have this bucket that can handle whatever life throws their way, and that's getting overwhelmed too quickly, right? When we're dumping all these perfect storm ingredients into that bucket, they reach their breaking point really, really quickly. The way I think of this is, parents, I want your job to be limiting what they have to face. Your job is to limit the stress that goes into that bucket, whereas our job as pediatric chiropractors is to give them a bigger bucket, give them more adaptability so that they don't get over the edge, they don't reach their tipping point as easily as they would otherwise. To a certain extent, we can't completely avoid, we can't minimize the stuff that they are faced with. We can't completely avoid the stress that our kids are gonna face, but we can absolutely minimize it, and we can give them a better ability to adapt to it by giving them that greater bucket. So all in all, that is what we call dysautonomia. Subluxation, dysautonomia, think of those as a very, very similar concept. Parents relate all the time to this phrase of their kid is wound up, but also worn out. That dysautonomia term encapsulates a lot, right? You might not be able to see the little handout here, but you might think of anything from adult conditions as POTS or anxiety or sleep challenges or depression, all the way through ADHD, OCD, sensory processing, tic disorders, autoimmune challenges. Those are all under that umbrella of a dysregulated nervous system, right? When we think from a root cause-based framework, that is what's at the kind of the foundation of all of those other challenges. We've got to start with that foundation, right? The other pieces of health, the other pieces of conventional holistic medicine, they don't really hit it here, right? And listen, we love the explosion of holistic, functional, integrative medicine. I'm so glad that that is becoming more commonplace, and that is the first option for a lot of families rather than traditional healthcare with medications. But so frequently it's still missing that root cause concept, right? Because unless it's addressing the nervous system, which you have to address the subluxation to get to the bottom of, you can't really fix it through supplements, through therapies, through diet interventions or detox protocols, because your nervous system isn't regulating that. It's not just what food you put into your body, it's how you can break it down and process it and integrate it. So we got to start with that foundation. We got to build from that foundation up. And if we do that, well, then the holistic, integrative, functional medicine approaches are way more effective. You get way more out of it when you go from that sequencing. But that is what matters, because otherwise you end up in this storm. You end up in this dysautonomia, subluxated state, which starts for kids, affecting more of those basic functions, like I said, colic, eating, sleeping, even ear infections, or some of the motor challenges that kids will deal with W sitting or toe walking early on. That's how it starts. Then it turns into more sensory seeking behavior. It'll be more of the meltdowns, the sensory overload. They don't have a filter for anything that they're taking in or experiencing on the other side of it. And then they get to the school age and we're dealing with emotional regulation issues or focus challenges. We're struggling to sit still in school. We're maybe starting to develop some stimming behaviors or some neurotics. And this just keeps building. It keeps showing up differently throughout different seasons of life until you address the underlying cause. Hopefully you've heard me say that enough times now to get that is the point here. That is the moral of the story, is get to the why. Get to that foundational piece so that you can build on it, so that you can do the diet, detox therapies, and everything else that your child might need. Don't forget this phrase: your child is not giving you a hard time, they are having a hard time, right? They're struggling, they're dealing with these internal challenges, and so we need to respond with grace. We need to respond with putting them in a position to succeed. So what does that look like? How is the insight, neuro-based approach so different than healthcare? Because we're not going to do lab tests or blood draws or things that look at that downstream or secondary piece of it. We want to look at the nervous system. We have 3 different scans that we use at Thrive to measure how well is your brain and body communicating. It's basically quantifying subluxation. We're going to figure out where those primary patterns are, how severe are those primary stresses, and then what is it going to look like to get to the other side of it. What is that game plan? What does that personalized, individualized care plan look like for that kid? That is what I would encourage you to start with, because then we can see that healing journey take place. We see their nervous system change, and then almost always we see healing go in a predictable pattern. It doesn't start with the big, weighty neurological issues, right? It doesn't start with better communication or some of the more demanding neurological steps. It starts with eating, sleeping, pooping, what we call the soft signs of healing. Maybe then some immune system regulation and posture and tone changes, and then we get to speech and emotional regulation and focus and more of those deeply seated, locked in challenges. Those happen once that foundation is taking place. So we got to start with the nervous system. Guys, do not just keep hoping that your kid will grow out of it eventually. Let's do something different to help support them. Let's do something different to get to that root cause. These aren't random. These aren't genetic issues. There's a nervous system foundational piece of the puzzle that's missing, and that's what hopefully this video helped you understand more. Don't throw out what you're doing. Don't feel like you've wasted all this time and energy and money. Let's just change up the sequence, get to that neurological cause, and then we can see healing, connect, and change in a massive way. I hope that helps, parents. Every single kid counts. Expect miracles for your kids, and I cannot wait to meet you in the office soon and help your family thrive.